In this video we're going to be looking at photographing Great Crested Grebes. I'm sitting in a car park in the pouring rain in Wroxham up on the Norfolk Broads, and I've come up today with two of my friends from the camera club, and we're hiring a boat to go out on the Broads to photograph grebes. Hopefully it's going to brighten up. Forecast is for 9 or 10 o'clock, sort of clearing and that sort of thing. And provided we get some soft lighting, that should be fine for grebes, because you don't want bright sunlight. Often as not, the white on their breasts will burn out. So I want sort of fairly soft lighting. I certainly want the rain to stop. So where I live in Colchester, there's actually two lakes nearby where I can photograph grebes. But the trouble is they're quite large lakes, and often as not the birds are quite far out, so you need a very long telephoto lens, and even then sometimes you have to crop into the pictures. Big advantage of going out on a small boat is that the birds are quite used to seeing quite used to seeing boats all the time, so they take absolutely no notice of them whatsoever, so you can actually get quite close to them and photograph them with relative ease. So there's three of us. What happens is that there's be two in the back taking pictures, one will be driving the boat, and then we take it in turns. But it's actually a very good way because you can get really close to the birds without any fear of scaring them. They don't take any notice of the boats whatsoever. So fingers crossed it'll brighten up later, and I'm sitting in the car park in the pouring rain at the moment, but hopefully it should brighten up and we'll see what we get. We hired the boat from Richardson's Boat Hire. We just hired it for the morning from 9 o'clock till 2 o'clock. Details of the cost can be found on their website. As there was three of us, we could split the cost three ways. Richardson's have several boats for hire of varying size, and as you can see from the photograph, covers are left on the boats overnight in case of rain. As it was still raining when we boarded the boat, they asked us to keep the cover on whilst it was raining. This would have made photography very difficult, but fortunately it stopped raining about 9:30, so we pulled the rain cover back. This gave us room in the back for two people to photograph whilst the third person drives the boat. We took it in turns to drive the boat, so we all had the opportunity of photographing from the rear. The person driving the boat can still shoot out of the side windows, but it's more restrictive compared to the open rear end. These shots were taken out of the side window whilst it was raining. Although initially it was a wet start, the forecast was to brighten up mid-morning. What we did not want was a day with blue skies and bright sunshine, so cloudy bright was probably the best conditions. The two Broads that we visited were Wroxham Broad and Salhouse Broad. Wroxham Broad is the larger of the two. Although we did get shots in Wroxham Broad, we found the smaller Salhouse Broad to be more productive. As explained in the intro video, birds on the Broads take very little notice of boats. In fact, grey-lag geese and swans will come right up to the side of the boat, thinking you're going to feed them. This swan, carrying a chick on its back, came so close to the side of the boat that I struggled to get it in. I decided to go in for a tighter headshot of the chick. We visited the larger Wroxham Broad first, and although it did seem quite quiet compared to previous visits, we did find this heron which posed well for us. It seemed totally oblivious to us, and after we had all obtained some decent shots, we moved on. Although grebes do not have any fear of boats, it's best to keep a sensible distance away from them so that you do not disturb them. I was using the Olympus 100-400 f5 to 6.3 lens. The flexibility of the zoom was very useful because although I was shooting at the 400mm end for most of the time, although there were occasions where they would swim close to the boat and I'd have to zoom back between 2 to 300mm. On Salhouse Broad we came across a pair of male and female grebes with two chicks. The chicks were quite well grown. They had not learnt yet to catch fish for themselves, so were dependent on the adults bringing fish into them. Most of the time the parents would bring in small fish, which neither chick had any trouble with. Then one of the adults brought in a large roach. When we saw the size of the roach, we were amazed that the chick would be able to swallow it. It did take the chick a good few minutes and numerous attempts, but eventually, and to our amazement, it did swallow it. Because it struggled to get it down, it gave us plenty of time to get a series of decent images. It was interesting that the chicks had reached the stage where they were starting to copy the adults, either by standing up and wing flapping, or presenting each other with bits of weed and vegetation. In this shot, the adult brought in some weed for them, then dropped it in front of them. Both chicks then buried their heads in the water and tried to retrieve it, and then present it back to the adult. There are certain actions that the grebes perform that are great to photograph. You will often see grebes rise out of the water to flap and stretch their wings, often accompanied afterwards when they lunge forward. Unfortunately, on these occasions they did this, neither of the adults were facing me. This sideways on sequence was probably the best, although the lighting was quite dull. With 50 frames per second on the OM1, capturing this sort of action is not difficult. Throughout most of the morning the weather was a bit dull and overcast. Having been to the Broads to photograph grebes before, I knew that we did not really want bright sunshine. In those conditions, contrast can be a real problem. So here I'm going to show a few stills from 2 previous visits photographing grebes on the Broads. On this occasion we had almost perfect weather, with periods of soft light as well as periods where the sun did come out. The trip was early on in the year, and the chicks on that occasion were a lot smaller, so we obtained images where they were riding on the adult's back. We also found 2 nests where the adults were still sitting on eggs. Because we did not want to disturb the nesting bird, we kept our distance, and these 2 shots were quite heavily cropped. Although brighter lighting can produce great images, at times it can be a real problem. On the second occasion I had wall-to-wall blue skies with bright sunshine all day long, and even though I was shooting in RAW, it was still difficult to retain detail in the white breast unless you underexpose quite dramatically. On this occasion we were lucky enough to see a weed dance, but it was in full sun and I should have underexposed more. Even with bringing the highlight sliders in the RAW converter back fully, it was very difficult to get any detail in the white of the breast on the birds. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll be notified of future uploads. Thanks for watching.